So now that we have a way to open our skill tree widget, we need a way to move it around. In this video, we'll create the ability to right click and drag the tree around with our mouse. So inside the WBP skill tree widget that we created last time, we'll start by making a function and we'll call it pan. We'll create a category for it, call it camera because it behaves like a camera. And we'll take the nodes canvas that we created last time. Again, remember this is the canvas that everything's going to be attached to. Basically the idea is we're just going to be moving this around while everything stays attached. We're going to do a set render translation and we're going to set it to its current transform translation plus the updated difference in cursor position. So we'll create two variables here, cursor position, and make it a vector 2D. And we'll duplicate it and do a last cursor position. Compile. We'll subtract the last cursor position from the cursor position. And we'll also multiply this by another variable called panning speed, which will be a float. Compile. And lastly, we will set the last cursor position to the current cursor position. Let's make all these variables private advanced display because we'll never touch them manually because this panning speed is actually going to be set by our component, which remember will control everything. This will be the first variable that we put in there. And now we have a function which updates the translation of our skill tree according to where we're moving our mouse. So to set this panning speed, we're going to create an interface function that pulls all the relevant data from the component into the skill tree widget when it's created. So we'll go back to the event graph and on construct and also on pre-construct, if design time is true, we'll get player controller, get component by class this time, get our skill tree component, and we'll promote to variable and call it skill tree component. Just as a quick note, the reason we are using a reference to the class here instead of a tag like before is because this is part of the skill tree system. So this component will always be loaded when this widget is open, so it won't make the game any heavier. Now we'll come out to the MISC data folder and we'll open our interface for iSkillTreePC component and we'll add a second function. We'll call it getTreeInfo. And we'll put it in another category. This one's a bit more hidden within our game called STPPCInternal. And we'll add an output, which is a float, panning speed. Compile and close this. Now we'll drag off here and we'll call that message, getTreeInfo, the message, and we will set that panning speed here. Now the last thing we need to do is add that variable to the component. So we'll come out here, components, BPC skill tree PC, and look at our new interface function here, STPPCInternal, getTreeInfo, and now we'll promote to variable. Compile, and let's set the panning speed to a default value of 1.2. This value approximately follows the mouse speed. Compile, close component, and we're going to have a bunch of stuff coming off of this construct here, so just to make this a little bit tidier, we'll collapse this into a function. And we'll call it something like catch skill tree component and info. So now that we have this function that pans the tree according to the mouse movement, we need to call it. So we can close it. And over here on tick, we'll call the function. And now to update the cursor position with the mouse, we'll come here to functions, override, go down to on mouse move. You can alt left click to break this wire. And off of mouse event, you can get screen space position, and you can set that to the cursor position. Connect here, and that's going to be handled. Now if we close this function and go over to the designer tab, we can delete that image that was just a test image for last time, and we can fire up our game and test it, and we'll see a few issues here. So we'll press the key to open the widget. And the research points isn't even on the screen until we start dragging our mouse up and to the left and then we can see it start to come on the screen, so it's not even centered. And then when we do drag it, it gets stuck here. So to fix the first issue, we'll come back over to the graph, and we'll create a new function, call it mouse clicked. And we can put it in the mouse category, and we'll make an input, call it mouse button, which is going to be a pointer event structure. Compile, drag off the mouse button, get affecting button. If the affecting button equals the right mouse button, we'll do a few things. First, we'll tell the skill tree that we're panning so that it only drags around when this is happening. So we'll create a variable, panning, make it a bool, alt left click, set it to true, and we'll set the last cursor position to the cursor position. This makes it so they're both equal, so there won't be any initial offset. And lastly, we'll right click and type in cursor, and we will set the cursor to none. And this is just a design choice to make the cursor disappear when we're dragging it around. And a couple of videos from now, we're gonna have functionality to autofocus on nodes when they're clicked, and that's gonna be timer based. So we're gonna create a timer and just clear that out here. We'll call it autofocus timer, and we'll make it a timer handle. Drag it in and clear, and it validate timer by handle, and we can return. So now that we've created this function that does all these things that we want, we need to call it on the right mouse events. So we're going to come up here and we're going to override two mouse events, on mouse button down, and also on mouse button double click. And we're going to add this function to both, passing in the mouse event into the mouse button. And both will be handled. I'll just copy and do the same over here. Now we'll override on mouse button up and set everything back to the way it was. So drag off mouse event, get affecting button. If it's the right mouse button, set panning to false, set cursor to default to bring it back, and handle it. Now finally, to put this panning variable into use, we'll go back to the event graph, and on tick, we'll make a branch, and we'll only pan if panning is true. And now if we fire it up and we press our widget key, we see it appear right in the middle. We can move the mouse around, nothing happens. And if we right click and move the mouse around, now the widget drags with our mouse. Now there's still one small issue. Let's say we open it up and we have a smaller viewport resolution than the resolution of the monitor. If we fire it up and we go to drag this, it kind of stops short proportional to how much smaller it is than the monitor. So to fix that, in the on mouse move function, we'll disconnect this, make some space here, get game user settings, get desktop resolution, divide that by the viewport size, and multiply this get screen position by that, plugging it in here to the cursor position and connecting it. Now when we fire it up and test it out, it's much more accurate. Now we can just tidy up a bit, comment the functions. Set all the rest of the variables to private and advanced display. And before I forget, go back into Designer, select the background blur, and change the blur strength to something a little higher. So now that when we open it up, We have the start of a skill tree that we can now drag around the screen as we choose. In the next video, we'll implement functionality to zoom in and out of the tree.